Now, the carbon emission from Indian Railways was 6.84 million tons in 2014, which, if you compare with the total carbon emission of the country, was 0.25% of the total emission in this country. So that's quite significant coming from one single industry, which is the railway industry. And therefore, in this context, it is highly recommendable and very, very commendable that the Indian Railways has targeted to reduce their carbon emission to nil by 2030. That's a very short period of time. That's just 10 years in which they plan to make the carbon emission zero. Now, if you look at the magnitude of the problem in the context of how big the issue is and how big a problem the Indian Railways is trying to solve, the Indian Railways transports nearly 8 billion passengers and 1.2 billion tons of freight every year. That's huge. That's almost 6 times the entire population of the country being transported every year. And India therefore has the fourth largest rail network in the world after the US, Russia and China, and we have 67,000 kilometers of track and roughly 7,300 stations. It would be a humongous effort to make this entire infrastructure as carbon neutral in the next 10 years. If we do not add any new tracks and any new stations, it would imply covering 6,700 kilometers of track into carbon neutral every year, or roughly 600 kilometers of track has to be converted to carbon neutral every month for the next 10 months. So every month for the next 10 years, we need to convert 600 kilometers of track into carbon neutral track, which means that all of these tracks have to be electrified. Now, of course, some of it is already electrified, but it still is a very significant effort to be done. Similarly, since there are 7,300 stations that the Indian Railways has, we need to convert 60 stations per month or 2 stations per day every day for the next 10 years and upgrade them to become a carbon neutral station. Till date, I have not yet come across any standards from a carbon neutral perspective that have come out from the Indian Railways, so that needs to be brought out on a war footing. This also implies that all the trains have to be moved away from diesel and other fuels to the electric trains. So all the locomotives have to be upgraded. The Railways has targeted 100% electrified train network by December 2023, which would make it the first railway of this scale in the world which will be diesel-free and 100% electric. But then the question is, what happens to the diesel locomotive manufacturing plant that we are setting up or that is being set up by GE in India, and where India has an agreement to offtake 1,000 diesel locomotives for a period of time. So the electrification of all trains by 2023 would naturally also imply a move to write off the 175 billion rupees or $2.8 billion contract that Indian Railways has signed for the 1,000 diesel locomotives that was signed in November of 2016. Now keep in mind that the first of the diesel locomotive from this plant and 100 of them per year is planned to be coming out will start happening in 2022. So if the production of the diesel locomotives is starting in 2022, then how can all the locomotives become electric in the Indian Railways by 2023? So clearly this contract has to be cancelled. There are challenges that need to be resolved by Indian Railways. Cancelling the agreement will also undermine one of the most promising infrastructure projects in the country and, as I mentioned, put future foreign investments at risk. In addition, a significant alteration of the contract will have a serious impact on job creation and skill development and cause the government to incur substantial costs, because clearly there will be penalties that is built into the agreement. So the moment the agreement is cancelled, those penalties will start kicking. From a logistics perspective, there are roughly 5,500 diesel locomotives in the Indian Railways. To convert them into electric by 2023, one needs to convert at the rate of about 1,800 locomotives per year or 150 per month. This is a tall task for any railways in the world. The plan also includes using land along the tracks to generate 20 gigawatts of clean energy, using solar power plants manufactured in India, and shutting down old coal plants. We also need to find if Indian Railways has capacity to source the entire power requirement of the railways from renewable sources. That would imply replacing 29 lakh kiloliters of high-speed diesel into energy coming from renewable sources, which is again a very tall task. The only two asks I have is to make sure that all of this is done in an Atmanirbhar manner, which is that most of it is manufactured in India. And second is, as the Indian Railways hurtles towards privatization, the carbon neutral mantra of the Indian Railways is also adhered by the private entities. So on behalf of IET, I would wish the Indian Railways the very best on this very audacious journey